Bom dia. Good morning, everyone. So, my name is André Duarte. I'm the Senior International Officer at Federal University of Paraná. And it's my pleasure to be here hosting this second session of the FAUBAI conference. Today, we're going to start with a very interesting conference, which in a certain way will continue the addressing of the topic that we have addressed yesterday. Today, it's my pleasure to be presenting Professor Jewell Green Winn. She will be talking about what we lose when we don't include. Professor Jewell, she serves Tennessee State University as Senior International Officer, Executive Director for International Affairs, Chief Diversity Officer, and Assistant Professor at the Department of Educational Administration. Her research interests include diversity, global strategies for minority-serving institutions, cultural competence, and the acculturation of international students. She has authored and co-authored articles and book chapters. She is the immediate past president of the Association of International Education Administrators, and she serves on the American Council on Education Women's Network Advisory Council, the Tennessee Diversity Consortium, and Alignment Nashville. She's also a member of Diversity Abroad, the Forum on Education Abroad, and Women in Higher Education in Tennessee. So she will deliver her speech from here, and then later there will be time for us to discuss and questions and answers. So please, let's welcome Ms. Jewell, Dr. Jewell Green Winn, to the stage.
Good morning. I can say hola. It's a beautiful, beautiful morning here in Belo Horizonte, and I'm just so honored to be here. But I would like to first acknowledge the FAUBAI organization for thinking of me and bringing me 5,000 miles across the waters to join you today. So please, let's thank the conference committee and the FAUBAI organization for this great conference. Next, I want you to all stand up. Stand up, stand up, stand up, stand up. If you can stand up, stand up. Then I want you to give all of yourselves a round of applause for just being able to get here today. Give yourselves a round of applause. So now, when you go back to your institutions, you can tell everyone that you got a standing ovation on the first day of the conference. You may be seated. Again, it is such an honor to stand before you all today to share my thoughts as well as some research around a sometimes difficult topic, and that is inclusion. The theme of the conference is so relevant considering the numerous challenges our world is facing. Building knowledge with all voices. And of course, I want to focus on all voices, regardless of race, ethnicity, sexual preference, religion, marital status, economic status, and so forth. I also totally agree that knowledge and inclusion are pillars for building a better world, but more importantly is the use of knowledge and the actions around inclusion. You see, I am a third-generation college graduate in my family, and our children make the fourth generation. And as I have witnessed over the course of my 40-plus years in higher education, I continue to be perplexed by generations and generations of educated folks who haven't necessarily used their knowledge they gained to benefit all people, and that is troubling. So bear with me as I dive into a deep conversation about what organizations and institutions lose when everyone is not included. The conference website states that internationalization plays a leading role, uniting different cultures and listening to all voices. I couldn't agree more. One institution that I'm familiar with stated that if international programs has one purpose, it is to open the minds and hearts of our community to the reality that the world is a stronger and better place when we celebrate the humanity in every individual and in every nation. So how do we do this? There are a few basic definitions that I want to share first. Equality. Equality is about the fair treatment of everyone. Equity. Equity is about creating equal possible outcomes for everyone because despite effort and merit, people can experience substantial barriers on our campuses. Diversity in this context is simply the mix of people. And inclusion. Inclusion is the culture in which the mix of people can come to work, and in our case, on our campuses, they feel comfortable and confident to be themselves, and they work in a way that suits them and effectively delivers the curriculum, the co-curriculum, the programs, and the support services. Inclusion will ensure that everyone feels valued and, importantly, adds value. When people feel included, ladies and gentlemen, they are better able to contribute to the group and their society without fear of being ostracized and criticized. By bringing their ideas forward, they are offering a particular perspective, which usually stems from a completely different background. This is what frightens the majority oftentimes. Many organizations and institutions have figured out what diversity is, but not inclusion. You may have invited me to your party, but you did not ask me to dance. It is crucial to embrace an employee's full, authentic self, whatever that is, whether it's dreadlocks, whether it's braids, whether it's purple hair, whether it's hijabs, and whatever they identify as. What are your personal pronouns? He, she, they, and now it has become a personal pronoun. Don't you feel your best when you are your truest self? You don't have to fake it, but then you must feel included or else you will stay away from the party. You will stay away from the table. You will lean back and not in. Inclusion, again, ladies and gentlemen, refers to the degree to which diverse individuals are able to equally participate all the time. I want you to reflect on how you felt when you were new to a group that you were totally unfamiliar with. Did everyone use their voice? Did everyone participate in the decision-making processes? Did it appear that everyone felt like they actually belonged? I'm going to give you an example of my first meeting at AIEA, which is the Association of International Education Administrators, an association that I had the privilege and honor of serving as the first African-American female president after 40 years of being in existence. When I went to my first meeting, I was about the only one that looked like me. I could probably count them on one hand. Well, that doesn't necessarily bother me to be the only one in the room because I was invited to the party. Nobody asked me to dance. Nobody talked to me. I was standing around. I'm a very assertive, happy-go-lucky person. I like to hug and but nobody talked to me. I was like, what is going on? Did I get the wrong invitation? Is this not the right party? I felt excluded. I was determined from that point to let the association know this is not an inclusive association. We have some issues, and if I am going to pay my membership fee to be a part of this association, somebody needs to ask me to dance. That's what we need to continue to think about on our campuses, at our institutions, in our organizations, in our clubs. How are we displaying an inclusive attitude and character? For me, in many instances, the answer to those questions was no, no, and no. So at a cursory view, can we say that when we don't include, we could possibly lose passionate, educated, committed voices? We could lose out on collaborative decision-making processes, and we could lose the ability to empower aspiring leaders. These individuals won't last long. They won't stay long. They will find somewhere else to work. When employees feel included, according to the research, they feel a sense of belonging that drives increased positive performance results and creates teams who are innovative and engaging, as previously stated. The individuals leading these efforts are considered inclusive leaders. And I hope when you all leave the conference this week that you will have another label associated with yourselves and say, I am now an inclusive leader. Inclusive leaders are leaders who can empower team members to take risks and manage their own cultural competency development. They are transparent and they are culturally agile. They know how to move in and about the organization. And most importantly, they embrace the vast diversity of today's higher education campuses without any hesitation. Now, the other side of inclusive leadership involves facing several challenges, and we know whenever you're a leader, there are pros and cons to being a leader. The first one, communication. Now, do you have the ability and courage to communicate across cultures, approaching someone who doesn't look like you? Interesting. When I was at the conference, I approached everybody, and I bet people were looking at me like, something wrong with her? She's just going around talking to everybody. Because I'm a people person. Everyone doesn't have that. But as a leader, you're going to have to gain that confidence to be able to communicate, to start a conversation with someone who does not look like you. And I posted the picture of the young man in the dreadlocks. He's pretty handsome, right? But if we are in a Starbucks at night in a city that we don't know, and this is the only person in the Starbucks, are you willing to say, hola? Something to think about. An institution's performance will never improve until the culture is where people feel valued, safe, and share the goal of self-improvement. Institutions that have improved the emphasis on culture will be successful. Culture always should precede programs. If teams of people do not improve, an institution never will. And that's from the Center for Improving School Culture. Let's look at unconscious bias. Unconscious bias is a natural process in the human brain. When I do trainings, I ask in the room, how many of you all are biased? Nobody wants to raise their hand. I'm the first one. We're all biased. It's okay. It's not a bad thing. It's what do you do to address those biases? It can sometimes be helpful for navigating a complex world, but it makes us jump to conclusions and can cause us to discriminate against others, as we will see shortly. A lack of trust. Can you be trusted since you are bringing in all of these different types of people? I had a colleague tell me in DC this week, she's the president of this university. She has 15 people on her cabinet. So when she came in, she started cleaning house, and she brought in 3 females. They accused her of trying to start a sorority for hiring 3 females. The rumors began to surface about her not being trustworthy. Imagine that. Trying to check every box. Diversity and inclusion has to be more than checking a box. Okay, we got this person, this person, this person, this person. Has to be more than that. It is a necessary imperative, colleagues, and it must start with each one of you, all of us. Discrimination. As former US President Barack Obama said, we should all make more of an effort to discuss with one another in a truthful and mature and responsible way the divides that still exist, the discrimination that's still out there, and the prejudices that hold us back. Hostility in the organization. Too much change and too fast can result in resentment to the point of hostility. Some people feel when others are empowered, they lose their power. When they lose their power, they feel defeated. That is when we see workplace bullying and, unfortunately, more unnecessary acts of violence. Lastly, a lack of senior buy-in. When I consult with universities on DEI issues, my first ask is that I meet with the president. I ask to see the university's diversity statement or equity statement. I have never been denied access to the president, but I have been on campuses that did not have any substantive statement in support of equity and inclusion. There was just an implied understanding, but no real senior buy-in. And those campuses were struggling. That's why they asked me to come. Let's look at a couple more quotes. These are two quotes that I hope you remember long after I'm gone. Inclusion is not a matter of political correctness. It is the key to growth. And this was stated by Jesse Jackson years ago, who was a civil rights activist in the United States. Another very important quote that I love is, "No significant learning occurs without significant relationship." If you don't get to know me, if you don't get to know those individuals that don't look like you and are not from your culture, it's going to be very difficult to develop a relationship with them. It's just going to be always, hola, ciao, hola, ciao. That's it. That is not a relationship. Do you agree? Well, I want to implore you to research UNESCO Story Circles. Story Circles is a structured yet flexible methodology for developing intercultural competencies in a variety of contexts, both formal and informal. My colleague Celso and I, we participated in Story Circles as members of the board of AIEA. It was profound. It's been piloted in 5 countries by UNESCO: Thailand, Costa Rica, Zimbabwe, Austria, and Tunisia. The methodology has proven to be effective on a variety of different issues, from the social inclusion of migrants to the dialogue from and among indigenous peoples, with participants acquiring strong skills for tolerance, empathy, critical thinking, and listening for understanding, not to react. In order to be sustainable and have a deep impact at local and regional levels, the methodology must rely on a network of solid trainers. I was fortunate to complete the training, and I conduct story circles on my campus, and it is very impactful, I might add. We must remember, culture is viewed and understood through your own lens, and it requires investigation beyond the surface. It's difficult to understand what you can lose if you don't understand what you gain through inclusion and intercultural competency development. Let's be reminded of some of the components of culture. We can ask an international student where they are from and get a simple answer. However, I want you to look at these other components of culture that can be considered equally as important for some. Language and communication style. I speak English. I have a tendency to speak very fast, but that's a part of my culture. Family relationships. I'm a married, female, heterosexual, 4 adult children, 6 grandchildren. I identify with I identify with she, her, and hers. My sexual orientation, my race and ethnicity, you can see, but this is what's so interesting. When I travel around the world, people always speak to me in their language instead of mine. When I was here, people were speaking to me in Brazilian as soon as I got off the plane. In Portuguese as soon as I got off the plane. They said, "Oh, you look Brazilian." I said, "Well, thank you. That's a compliment. I appreciate that." Religion and spirituality, class and socioeconomic status, health beliefs, level of acculturation, immigration status, perception of political power, and that's something we won't get into today, and impact of racism and history of oppression. Cultural competence is a set of behaviors, attitudes, and practices that come together in relationships, interpersonal and professional, that empowers the individuals to work effectively in cross-cultural situations. Ladies and gentlemen, we can lose that very easily. One higher education council suggests that the future depends on our ability to develop a citizenry that is globally competent. So let's see if you agree with the 3 C's they presented: comfortable, competent, and confident. We need to be comfortable in dealing with cultural differences. Remember the challenge with communication and the guy with the dreadlocks and the lady with the hijab and all of that? Are you comfortable with that? We had faculty on our campus that expressed some concern about some of our students who wore hijabs. I'm like, you're a faculty member, you're educated, you have knowledge, but you're not using that knowledge. You're showing your ignorance. My father told me that ignorance is temporary, stupidity is forever. Do something about it. We need to be competent in bringing our disciplinary backgrounds to bear in an international setting. Remember the challenge with unconscious bias? We all have some type of unconscious bias, so don't be too hard on yourselves. And we need to be confident in our ability to make a difference in such a context. Remember the challenge with checking every box. It's okay. People always ask me, what can I do? I need a solution. Give me something to do. There is not a one-size-fits-all to this conversation. Our institutions are different. Our leaders are different. We have to get the knowledge and use the knowledge. So do we truly believe in inclusion, or do we just want it stated because it sounds sexy? You all know how it is. The latest term comes out, it just sounds sexy. What are some of the new sexy words that you've heard lately? Anybody? Say it again. Decolonial. That's another sexy word. But it's important, right? So let's just not, as I told my colleague this morning, talk the talk. Let's walk the walk, okay? I'm going to move on to some other concepts and information that I really want you to think about, okay? Intelligent thought and reasoning. Inclusion actually makes us smarter. I hope you agree. A handful of studies have shown that people lose some of their ability to think clearly and perform given tasks when they've been made to feel excluded. Importantly, these results don't hold when people were made to feel misfortunate. It was the experience of being left out that produced cognitive declines. And I think about my son, the oldest son, who started playing football when he was a mere 5 years old. He was a bigger guy, real good. His father was a football star, and, he coached him along the years. And when he finally made it to the collegiate level, he realized his freshman year he wasn't playing. He was excluded. He was like, they recruited me. I'm on a full-year scholarship. Why is coach not putting me in? I'm like, do you want me to talk to the coach? Because you are my superstar, and you need to be on that field. And his dad told me, I need you to slow down. This is an opportunity for our son to learn. He has to be able to learn. Well, of course, being the mother that I am, I did call the coach. I did have a conversation with the coach, and I said, look, you all brought my baby all the way down here, and I'm traveling to all of his games. I need to see him on the field. Luckily, he did get an opportunity to play, and he did get an opportunity to go to the National Football League like my brother. So sometimes those difficult conversations do work out. Self-care and improvement. People who feel included are more likely to practice healthier behaviors and make it a priority to improve themselves. By contrast, though, people who feel excluded tend to prize short-term gain and take more risks. Professional development is important. Again, I applaud FAUBAI for stepping into these courageous conversations this week. Pro-social behavior. When people were told that everyone in their group wanted to work with them, researchers saw people donating more to charitable causes, being willing to volunteer for other tasks, and helping others after a mishap, and acting cooperatively. My students in my class, whenever I give them a group project, they panic on me. I don't want to work in a group. I'm going to be the one doing all the work. Nobody's going to do the. I'm like, you need to work in a group. You need to learn what group norms are. You need to understand how other people think, and you need to build on that. Pro-social behavior. When people were told that, no, that was the one, self-regulation. People made to feel included more often tolerate unpleasant experiences. They resist unhealthy temptations, and they persist longer on a very frustrating task because they are confident, remember that C, and have participated in self-care consistently. My husband pulled out a chess game that he bought the other day, and I'm like, what are you doing? And he said, well, I bought this chess game. I said, we have 3 chessboards in the house. What are you doing? He said, well, this is a smaller one, and I can kind of, reignite what I know. I said, just play me. It'll all come back to you. But he said, I need to be consistent. I need to be more disciplined. If I'm going to play with my friends, I need to up my game. Self-regulation. A sense of purpose. Inclusion bolsters people's larger sense that life is meaningful and that things are actually worth doing. People who feel excluded are more likely to agree with the statement, life is meaningless. Choose fewer emotional words, they turn away from a mirror, and they overestimate time intervals. This is what the research says. But this gets scary when we start to think about the suicide rates that are skyrocketing in the United States. People feel like they don't have a sense of purpose anymore. That's interesting. And as leaders, we need to be able to pick up on those things. We had a young girl to commit suicide on campus 3 weeks ago, and it was horrible. The call that had to be made to her parents to say, your baby is not here anymore. What was going on in that child's mind that made her feel it necessary to take her own life? She probably felt she didn't have a sense of purpose anymore. We don't know. But as leaders, we need to be keen on those signs, on those triggers that will make a person feel like you actually are worth it. You actually do belong on our team. And lastly, well-being. Increased social exclusion correlates with social anxiety, jealousy, loneliness, decreased self-esteem, and even depression. When we feel left out, we may even conjure elaborate stories of how others plot against us, how we don't have value, and so on. But when leaders actively try to include others, they create the conditions for people to feel socially connected, which greatly improves people's moods and overall health. Creating an inclusive culture is not a linear process. There will be starts and stops and turns along the way, but committing and adhering to a consistent effort will codify a work environment where everyone feels included, heard, recognized, and appreciated. Allow me to share some of the things that we did on our campus for our international students to make them feel welcome. We launched a Miss Collegiate International pageant. We had students from 12 different countries participate in a pageant, very similar to our Miss Tennessee State University pageant. It was attended so well that there was standing room only. When we asked the other students, the domestic students, why they were so interested, and they said, we wanted to understand about all of these different countries and to see just how beautiful they are and what they have on and everything that we could learn about them. That was so important. And now we have to turn away applicants because everyone wants to be a part of the Collegiate International pageant. We do a We Are the World International contest, so we partner with middle schools throughout the city and the public school systems, and we asked them, allow your students to draw pictures of their perspectives of the world. And we let our art professors on campus judge those pictures and that artwork, and then those students' art is displayed in our art gallery on campus. So this is getting the public schools involved in our system, and it's getting young people to think globally at a very young age. We also have a panel called Where I Come From. So we get people from across the world, but also domestic students from the East Coast, the West Coast, the North, and the South to talk about their different perspectives. And there's a moderator that asks some very key questions, and it is always well attended as well. We do Brothers United. We bring men together to have some of those tough conversations that only men should have. They didn't even let me in the room. I wasn't invited to the party. They didn't ask me to dance. I was very excluded, but that was okay. I was okay with that. Then we have One Beat, where only the women could come. All of the women from the different cultures, they come together, they take off their hijabs, and they dance. We teach them the electric slide, they teach us the belly dance, we do all types of things, and we have fun. So women are united with one beat, one song. Our International Food Festival, it is what it is. I'm sure everyone does that on their campuses. And then the Cultural Appreciation Day. When we don't show and share appreciation for each other's cultures, sometimes people will feel that things are unequal, that their culture is less valued. This is considered social inequality. Did it change? No, I'm not sure. You've heard me talk a lot about the U.S. culture and concepts around inclusion, but in facing social inequality, it is contended that Brazil has been discovering the strong influence of culture in shaping this context, as well as its potential for social transformation. I was so excited when I was reading this. However, there is still room for developing a deeper cultural approach to indigenous peoples and Afro-descendants in Brazil, according to this literature. Although they are groups with so low social indicators, they have an exuberant wealth of cultural expressions that must be recognized and valued. The literature also suggests that special attention is necessary regarding the preservation and acknowledgement of Brazilian culture in the following aspects. I mean, I was reading about Brazil like I was, oh my goodness, it was just so exciting. The value of popular and indigenous traditions, arts, customs, and expressions, the recognition of the influence of African culture on Brazilian culture and history, the preservation of endangered languages, the value of traditional knowledge about nature, the sustainable use of natural reserves and investments in infrastructure, the affirmation of human rights, and the fight against discrimination. We can hopefully agree that failing to include or embrace the diverse cultures around us can also cause us to lose the ability to be more socially mobile. Social mobility refers to change in a person's social, economic situation, either in relation to their parents, which is intergenerational, or throughout their lifetime, which is intragenerational. Again, all of what I've been sharing this morning has been centered around the theme of culture. So as I look around the room, all of us come from different cultures that I'm sure you are very, very proud of. I know I'm proud. I was raised during the Civil Rights era in the United States, and my lived experiences taught me the importance of appreciating other cultures while embracing my history. A history that was full of pain, trauma, oppression, etc. But I stand on the shoulders of some very strong people. Therefore, I have no choice but to be successful. I don't want my ancestors to feel as though they lost anything by pouring into me, but hopefully gained a sense of pride for their sacrifices. In preparing for this presentation, I wanted to understand more about the diversity underpinning Brazilian society, and this is what I found. Again, very exciting. Brazil has grown rapidly from its prehistoric makeup of tribes and settlements. This results from mass migration during the latter 19th century, colonization via the Portuguese and the forced movement of slaves who were primarily taken from Western Africa, all these events helped make Brazil the 5th largest country in the world. While half of Brazilians are of European descent, the rest of the country are African, Asian, and American Indian descent. This excludes, of course, the boundless intermixing of ethnicities within this population and the migration of individuals of other ethnicities from outside of Brazil. Now, I need you all to tell me if this literature is incorrect when you all see me after this, because this has truly gotten me thinking about a lot of things. So just pull me to the side and say, that was wrong, that's not correct. I'm okay with that, just let me know. Despite being a large country, habitable land is limited in Brazil. Almost 70% of Brazilian land is populated by rainforests, and only the majority of people live in 10% of the land? Is that correct? Somebody said no, somebody said yes, so I'm just gonna leave it right there. Due to its being such a vast country, it comes as no surprise that Brazil is characterized by a significant regional variation which includes geography, climate, and culture. As an example, they said the arid northeastern part of Brazil is considered cowboy area. Okay? Rio is home to the Playboys. São Paulo is the business hub and primarily populated by business people and professionals. Salvador da Bahia is primarily populated by individuals of African descent, and the southern part of the country is primarily home of those of European descent. Lastly, now this was so interesting, I talked to a guy on the plane about this. Brazil is home to the largest population of Japanese outside of Japan. Now, is that true? Yes. Wow! Many are now third generation, and of this group, significant numbers are now unable to even understand Japanese. Now that blew me away. I talked at length to this passenger on the plane because I was so excited about coming to Brazil. He was so impressed that I had researched his country. I told him all about the conference and where I was going and all of that, and he said, well, good for you. I want you to enjoy, but I need you to come back in the summer so you can participate in Carnival. All right. But this new knowledge, it caused me, yes, there you go. It caused me to look at this framework that I use a lot of times when I am doing DEI training, and it's called the cycle of socialization. Really simple. There are only 4 terms up there. The first one, born. We're all born, right? Nobody came here through osmosis, right? We're all born. You're born into your families. Your families teach you things. Right, wrong, or indifferent, they teach you things. Then those things that you're taught are reinforced by the people that you are around, your churches, your teachers, your clubs, your friends, all of those things are reinforced. And then guess what you do? You go and teach those same things that were reinforced to you. See how simple that is? It's just a cycle, right? But let's take it one step further. Understanding the cycle can help us improve as we attempt to address any gaps in our personal development. Stereotypes. What causes stereotypes? Words, media, verbal images, television, things that we hear, that makes us think about people in a certain way, doesn't it? Oh, you don't trust a person with a hoodie on, because that's all we see. In America, when you see a black guy with a hoodie on, you're like, oh, I better stay away from him. Not maybe thinking he's an athlete like my son. He was an athlete, so he wore hoodies all the time. But I was scared that he was being stereotyped. So when he told me he had to go running at night and he had on a hoodie, I was like, God, please protect him and cover him. Because he was a black male wearing a hoodie, so he was stereotyped. Next, we have prejudice, the thoughts, the filtering, the labels, the avoidance, the assumptions that he's a black male with a hoodie, he must be trouble. That's when we become prejudiced against individuals for no reason. Then we discriminate against them. Power plus prejudice, no access, excluding them, and then depression. We see it every day. Individuals who feel excluded in the workplace, they become depressed. They need mental health counseling. Mental health is real, and it is a big problem across our world. The pandemic took us through a lot, and it gave us an opportunity to think of things that we probably never would have thought of before. And then we began to internalize the oppression and the depression. It's like, oh my goodness, I'm so sad. I don't know why I'm sad. I don't know why I'm feeling like this. And then we begin to seek help. The messages that are sent, again, through the media, through the people that we surround ourselves with. That's why I strive so much on trying to be a positive individual. My husband tells me all the time about the 10-5 rule. If you see someone 10 feet away, smile at them. Engage them. If I'm smiling at you and I'm looking at you and I'm giving you eye contact, that should hopefully make you feel well, because I don't know what you dealt with when you left home. I don't know if your husband slapped you in the car on the way. I don't know if one of your children just got suspended from school. I don't know what your brokenness is when I see you, but the least I can do is to give you a smile. Some of you all are smiling at me now, and some of you are like, will she hurry up and finish? But my job here is to share some insightful information that I live, eat, and breathe daily. So as I begin to conclude, I think of those individuals who are used to being in power, those individuals who were born into wealth. What is it that they don't want to lose by inclusion efforts? Will it be their privilege? Will it be their assumed power, the power that they impose on others who they think less of? Walk with me through these last few thoughts and then decide for yourselves, what do we lose when we don't include? I'm going to circle back to the U.S., and I know you all have heard them say, let's make America great again. What in the world does that mean? I was like, well, when was it ever great? Was it great when you brought all of those Africans over here and beat them, didn't allow them to read, didn't allow them to go to school? Is that when it was great? What if someone told you, let's make Brazil great again? What would you think? It speaks to privilege, ladies and gentlemen. Those who have the money have the power, and they use the power to exert their privilege in every organization, institution, company, government structure, and system that exists. For example, the national headline news that broke 2 weeks ago in Tennessee, with the far-right legislative body expelled 2 young black state representatives for promoting gun laws to protect our children, because children were murdered in our city, my city of Nashville. So they wanted to protest that. Oh my goodness, the city went crazy, the state went crazy. And Tennessee began to receive national attention for its racist, discriminatory actions. People were writing letters stating that they were going to cancel their vacations to Tennessee in protest of this expulsion. But this last week, both representatives were voted back into the legislature by votes from the district they represented. So we ask, what are our institutional values? Do these values align with the values of the state? Well, it depends on what state you're in. The country, it depends on what country you're in. Those are very hard questions to unpack, especially when we know so much is wrong and so many voices are unheard and not included. We have lost what we didn't even understand we had, and that was agency. Everyone has a voice and the right to use that voice. We should think about groups that have had this type of privilege. Who was not at the table? Who was not at the party? Who didn't get invited to dance? Whoever was present and dancing, those people received favor. That's called privilege. What groups or cultures may have a different set of values? They can be different, but they can align. Just because a student, faculty, or staff member identifies as LGBTQ+, doesn't mean that they should not be respected. Do you understand what I'm saying? As you go back to your campuses and review the institution norms and core values, can you yourself, as part of the institutional culture, feel engaged, or do you feel separated and disengaged? Now, this is a big one, and it often makes people feel uncomfortable, but let's be truthful. How have certain groups been affected historically, socially, economically, by marginalization? Now, we certainly don't have enough time as I conclude to dig into a history lesson, but I would be remiss if I didn't reflect on a few moments in American history that have been stark reminders of the how. Black Wall Street and the Rosewood Massacre are just two of the many incidents post-slavery that resonate with me as I attempt to find some kind of sense in what we have witnessed over the last few years and to address the question, how did we get here and what did we lose? Black Wall Street, as it was affectionately called, located in Greenwood, Oklahoma, was modern, majestic, sophisticated, and unapologetically black, as one writer said. Unfortunately, and quite tragically, it was also the site of one of the bloodiest and most horrendous race riots and acts of terrorism, I might add, the United States has ever experienced from May 31st to June 1st of 1921. 300 African Americans lost their lives and more than 9,000 were left homeless when the small town was attacked, looted, and literally burned to the ground. The Rosewood Massacre was an attack on the predominantly African American town of Rosewood, Florida in 1923 by large groups of white aggressors. The town was entirely destroyed by the end of the violence, and the residents were driven out permanently. Fast forward to 2009, and certainly not to dismiss the numerous lives lost during the entire civil rights movement and beyond, but bear with me. Oscar Grant was pulled by police from a Bay Area transit in one of the first police shootings captured on video by bystanders. Trayvon Martin, unarmed teen, killed by a white man and acquitted of all charges. Tamir Rice, age 12, killed by a white police officer, acquitted of all charges. Freddie Gray died after suffering major spinal injuries while in police custody. Eric Garner, killed by white New York police officer. Michael Brown, Terrence Crutcher, Botham Jean, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, and many others unnamed. People of color, particularly black folks in America, are tired. Are they tired here too? Martin Luther King and many others during his era protested peacefully through the civil rights era, and we seem to be going backwards. We continue to not be heard and in so many instances disrespected. Black people and brown people have been treated unfairly, unjustly, unequally, and unnecessarily since we were forced to go to America to build and serve, not definitely the land of the free. Have we come a long way? In many cases we have. But each time we think progress has been made, societal ills make us sicker than ever. So many failed policies, housing, social services, and yes, education. Education should have been the pathway to prosperity for black people, but we were not even allowed equal access to that until the 1950s through a major lawsuit. During my time with you today, I emphasized and re-emphasized the struggle, the pain, and the frustration of a lost and forgotten people in some cases. I cannot be quiet anymore so others can be comfortable. I can't adjust my narrative so others can be comfortable. I will share my pain, my anger, and my emotions like many of the protesters have done around the world, hoping to just be heard and hoping that something will be done. It is difficult to solve a problem that you don't even understand. Hope, healing, and a healthy debate has made it to the top of my bucket list. A change must come. The next steps for you all and for us, commit to doing something. And this quote says it all. I am only one, but I am still one. I cannot do everything, but still I can do something. And because I cannot do everything, I will not refuse to do something that I can do. We are all leaders, senior international officers. Leadership is inspiring others to believe and enable that belief to become a reality. That's very difficult for people of color. Leadership can never be about you, ladies and gentlemen, but it must start with you. You can never improve a team, an organization, or institution unless what? You first improve yourself. I told my team that we were going to do something different with our bi-monthly International Student Coffee and Conversation a few months ago. I decided that we would engage them in a very difficult conversation, a conversation about racism, Not a conversation twisted and skewed by the media, but a conversation with passionate and impactful individuals who have their best interest at heart. I was getting feedback from my team that some of the students were scared, they were confused, and they didn't know what to do or what to think. Their parents were concerned about gun violence and racism in America. So, as the leader, I had to use my voice as a platform to influence and ignite the kind of dialogue that would lead to a better understanding and hopefully a meaningful change for them. It's not easy to change over 400 years of injustice, but as Martin Luther King stated, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Speak up, ladies and gentlemen. Stand up. Hire a qualified individual who does not look like you. Develop that person, promote that person, sponsor that person. Ask questions. Own your own ignorance. Remember, it's temporary. Own your hurt. Let's talk about it. As comfortable and uncomfortable as it may be in your own minds, provide platforms to educate and inform our international students of what's really going on. Systemic racism and, yes, 21st century segregation. Implement heritage programming on your campuses so that Black and brown students can become motivated to study abroad in countries where they have roots to. It's not too late. I would love to be able to see all of us live together as brothers and sisters in a community and not continually live with the bitterness and friction. But this is an unfinished work that each and every generation of human beings must be dedicated to. We've spoken very loudly now, so what will you do to be a more inclusive leader and not be considered a loser? You need to have that drive, being motivated to learn about a new culture. Have the knowledge, but use the knowledge, studying how culture shapes people's behaviors, values, and beliefs. Come up with a strategy, being able to factor culture into longer-term planning. And action. Walk the walk, behaving in a culturally sensitive way, including being able to think on one's feet in difficult situations. And lastly, ladies and gentlemen, it's not enough to change what we do. We must also change what we believe. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
So, thank you so much, Jewell, for a wonderful presentation, very insightful, and I'm sure it gave us all a lot to think. Let me just profit from the occasion of being here and start with some considerations, and then I'll pass the microphone to people for questions, and Jewell will answer. It seems that here in Brazil, we're dealing with a very particular circumstance. It goes both two levels. We have, as an effect of affirmative action policies from the past 20 years, we are experiencing two things. We have, at one level, expressions of blunt racism. We're all witnessing that, be in the streets, be at our universities. There have been many attacks. Racism is becoming more explicit. I couldn't say more violent because it has always been violent. But at a certain level here, we see that there is this kind of reaction against affirmative action policies' effects. So this is one level, and we have to face it. And we have to think how to face blunt racism. But at the same time, in our universities, and also because of affirmative action policies, there has been a strong transformation of our scenario, our everyday lives at universities. We have witnessed the changes of welcoming Black people, LGBTQ people, indigenous people at our universities. So at this second level, I couldn't say there is open racism. There is not. But then, we also need to approach the question how we effectively include that kind of diverse population, which was not in there in the past, but now they are. We're opening the doors. There have been many different policies for welcoming those people, but what should we be doing now for them to be welcomed and for them to stay and to feel and see that they're included, that this is not just an opportunity, scarce opportunity they have given. So they have earned this inclusion. But then there's also the responsibility for us to work on an everyday basis to effectively include diversity in our universities. So this poses different tasks, and we also have to address those different tasks. So there's blunt racism, and there's the idea that we have done our task because nowadays Black people, indigenous people, LGBTQ people, they're there. We have to do much more for them to be there. So these two different levels, I would like you to elaborate and talk a little more about that. Thank you.
Is this, okay. All right, so a lot of what you were saying I addressed in the presentation, but I can elaborate a little more. Again, each of your institutions are going to be different. And I guess the support for inclusion, as I stated, it must start at the top. And I don't think there are any presidents of institutions in the room, right? So one of the things that I work with campuses on is doing your own type of, or establishing your own inclusionary practices within your departments. You can only control what you can control. So I recommend affinity groups. So if there are how many ever indigenous students, or how many ever Black students, or how many ever LGBTQ students, encourage them to start clubs. We do that a lot in the United States. We have a lot of affinity groups. And so they begin to feel empowered, and then the curiosity is raised from those outside of the group. They want to become a part of those groups. You can also do it from a faculty and staff perspective. People need to get together and start having conversations. You can't even develop a policy or present a policy unless you know the viewpoints of everyone. I introduced this tool. It's called it's the Multicultural Organizational Development Tool. And what it does, it allows the organization or the department to assess where they are relative to cultural competency. And there are different levels, and it's anonymous, so people can actually go in and assess where they think they are. Because we can make all types of an assumption of where we think our institutions are, but until we hear from you, until we hear from the people, we're making a lot of assumptions, and we can't get anywhere that way. So once we take the assessment, then we analyze the data, and we make some key findings, develop some key findings based on that assessment, and then we begin to make progress with that. So we must start with assessing our culture on campus to even see if people think it's a problem. I mean, you're sitting here saying it, but you may be in an institution and say, oh, we don't have any problem, there's no racism, everything is fine, it's just hunky-dory. But it's not. But you gotta ask the people. That's what I start with my DEI training at institutions, along with the other things that I said within, because the whole bias thing, the whole stereotypical thing, a lot of the things that we're dealing with, it has to start from here. We have to be very honest with how we think and feel about certain things and not try to camouflage it because we're in the room with certain people. As you can tell, at my age, I say whatever I need to say, right? I'm very respectful, but I'm going to tell it like it is, but I always support it with research. So if you're telling me that you believe in inclusion, then why does your whole cabinet look like all white men? then you're not doing what you say that you need to do.
Great. No, very, very interesting what you just had said, because this comes along with the idea that we need to go beyond the talk and start walking. That's great.
Today.
Yeah, right now.
Right now.
So now we still have a certain time for you to ask questions. I believe there will be a microphone in the stage.
I know somebody has a question.
Would you please, okay, there's one hand raised here in the center. It's important that you raise your hands because here, there's another one here.
Okay, good morning. My name is Lau. Hi. Yeah, no, it's working. I represent, it's not working? No, it's working. I represent a German university here in Brazil, and I was wondering about mobility. The inclusion of people of different ethnical backgrounds. If you're talking about Brazilian students, if you're talking about PhD students, and they usually have a scholarship from the federal government or a local funding agency, and this scholarship supports also, more often than not, their own household. Yesterday we had a keynote, I don't know if you had the opportunity. No, okay. Bianca yesterday mentioned something that resonated much for me personally. She said that her mother got a scholarship for studying English in the United States when she was a young woman. And her mother was a cleaning lady, and she could not afford to stop working and leaving her household to live abroad because her income was so important for her own household. And if you're a scholarship holder and you go abroad, you still have to finance your life and you have to pay rent, but then you will be paying rent for your own, and you won't be able to support your family back home. And this is a very big challenge to deal with. I know this is a problem for the funding agencies probably, but I was curious about how you deal with that in the United States. So how do you promote mobility for those who can afford mobility, even though they are scholarship holders for mobility? Because they would have to support two households, their own abroad, and their family back home. So, and this is the point number one. A second point that would be probably easier to address with less money would be also surpassing the language barrier, because this is also a big problem here. Usually people with social challenging backgrounds, they do not have a broad knowledge of the English language or German language for that matter. So that will be easier to address while, for instance, expanding the stay for doing like an intensive language course 2 or 3 months prior to their stay for academic purposes. But when you think at the end of the day, all ends up with money challenges. So, and sorry I'm taking too long, but I know that US American universities have a lot of philanthropy for supporting students. You mentioned that briefly. We do not have this culture here where alumni support scholarships or chairs. We do not have this culture here. So how can we overcome this difficult challenge of money and the financial support of underprivileged students? Thank you.
Okay, well, that was a packed question, so I will try to unpack it and address portions of that. And it's very interesting that you said that, because my team is here participating in the Education USA Fair. And I stopped by the other day in Salvador to meet some of the students, and there were about 600 students that were there, and of the 600 students, probably 90% of them spoke Portuguese. We had an interpreter there, and my question was, if they need an interpreter at the fair, how are they going to succeed in higher ed in the United States? Fortunately, my campus and a lot of campuses in the US have intensive English institutes and intensive English centers, right? And it does cost. Ours is not that expensive, but expensive is not necessarily relevant to all families. Now, the challenge is, let me start with the positive. What I encouraged some of the students to do who only spoke Portuguese, that were graduate students that were interested in education, I said, you should come to our university, participate in the Intensive English Center, and if you're majoring in English, then you could get your master's degree in English, all right, through the College of Education, and then get paid as a student working in the Intensive English Center, helping to teach other students. So, that's a lot to try to understand, but the bottom line is, I'm from a historically black college, so we've always been under-resourced. The good thing is that we're state-supported, so we do get government funding, but the other thing is I know how to use other people's money. So I go and find grant funding, I do partnerships with embassies, I do partnerships with other agencies that have money, and then I find a way to collaborate in order to give, pockets of money to individuals. Those are personal choices and those are hard choices. Those conversations relative to money and finance, I think is above all of our pay grade, but it's still worth having a conversation. Again, you bringing that up there needs to continue to be brought up so that the people at the top can hear that, because that's going to require big policy changes that are far beyond what we could even begin to solve here. But let's just take, for example, in the United States, we have a lot of first generation and what we call Pell eligible students, so students who have a low economic status as far as their families are concerned. Those students can get financial aid in the United States to go to school, so they don't have that challenge. But let's just say we want to take them to study abroad. They're trying to work in the summer to help their families. So that is kind of similar to what you're saying. So what we do is we try to provide them with internships. They can do an internship, and part of their internship is a service learning experience abroad. So not only are they getting their study abroad experience paid for, they're participating in an internship that would also bring them in money that can help support the home. So we have to be creative and innovative when we're thinking about those challenges that face us. We cannot be defeated, ladies and gentlemen. We're all smart. If you weren't smart, you wouldn't be sitting here. Use your creativity to come up with ways and ask the types of questions that you're asking today, to come up with suggestions, and then push those suggestions up the ladder. Is that helpful? You're welcome.
Hola, my name is Nicola Maia. I come from southern Brazil, Porto Alegre. My question is virtual communication, social networks versus real-world interactions, and how much each one of the two modalities helps or doesn't help regarding diversity integration. So you take, for instance, social networks. Of course, there are a huge opportunity for everybody to express their personality, their identity, to give a voice to billions of people who never had a voice, never had a chance to be heard. On the other hand, social networks are also a way to close themselves in a virtual world, in a small bubble. It's also kind of a delusion to be heard, whereas actually people are not. Whereas with real-world interaction, when you're 10 feet away, you can have a look and smile to each other. Where you're a little bit closer, you can hug, you can really embrace the diversity. But of course, also real-world proximity leads to potential violence and rejection. So my question is, how much in your experience can one use virtual programs, the virtual world and the real world to foster diversity and inclusion, and how much do they help? How much do they prevent real inclusion?
I think you're asking about social networking. How is that helping? So for me and for the associations and the affiliations that I have, it's very beneficial. You remember at the end of my talk, I talked about sponsoring somebody, supporting one another. We have to find that comfort level. Remember the comfortability term that I use, being comfortable? A lot of the things that we're dealing with DEI, again, it starts inside. So we have to be able to we have to be willing to step outside of our comfort zone and ask for the help. For example, when Celso said, when we were having a conversation at our conference and he was sharing with me some of the diversity issues in Brazil, I said, I would love to talk about that, right? He reached out to me because he recognized that there was a need to have these conversations. The social aspect of it, I don't know, like in the United States, when people go golfing together, those are where the biggest deals are made, is on the golf course. We have to find that space that we're comfortable with to ask for the help that we need. Because no, everyone is not going to have that outgoing, assertive personality, and they're smiling, because our world, the truth is, a lot of us are really broken. You know, we can't deny the fact that there's still a lot of things going on that we don't want to talk about, that we're not ready to talk about. But being in those social networks and connecting with others who, you know, you're not familiar with, especially like through the story circles, can reveal a lot. I'm not really sure that I'm addressing the question as it relates to social networking, but again, getting to know others, being comfortable and confident and competent is very important. If you are not comfortable enough after here and you see me and you walk right by me, you're not comfortable enough to say anything to me, then you have the problem, I don't. You understand what I'm saying? You have to step outside of your comfort zone. I go into bathrooms at airports and start having conversation with people all the time. I have so many friends and sisters and daughters and nieces and stuff that I've adopted all over the world that don't look like me, but that's my personality. I had to get comfortable with that because I wasn't at first. Comfortable, right? And then confident. I can do this. You were confident enough to pick up the microphone and ask me that question, so you are confident, right? But then you become competent. You do your research. You understand the terminology. You understand what the literature and the research says. I don't know how many of you all in here have a faculty line or whatever, but you're researchers. You're on the campus of a higher ed institution. Use that opportunity to learn all that you can about diversity, equity, and inclusion. It is a plethora of research out there, so it's not something you need to make up. Everything that you do can be supported by the research, which is what I did today. Socially, you can make it happen. Just like you picked up that microphone, you can make it happen, okay? All right.
Great. We have still last question here.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, thanks for your words. Now I stood up. Thank you. Thanks for your words. I'm delighted by your presence and by your words. You talked about doing rather than being. I think it's very interesting to talk about racism and anti-racism. And I know that you didn't come to Brazil to deliver, to give people a mark of anti-racist, because there is a similar moment between Brazil and the United States now. I think we have different history concerning with discrimination and how we deal with this, because as you know, as you mentioned, professor from the Federal University of Paraná, we are talking about this even more, but it's not relevant the way it should be, because you have a George Floyd every day in Brazil. So George Floyd, someone that's being killed by police at gunpoint every day. But I want to talk about anti-racism because many scholars in Brazil are even more talking that they are, or they want to behave as anti-racist scholars. And Jewell, I want to talk to you because I bring something from the African philosophy that's doing is the reason for being. And I think for many scholars, especially white scholars, they want to address what's being. So I want to hear you about this because I have a friend of mine who's Ujuania, who's a scholar from the United States who speaks about bilingualism. And she says every moment she has to say that not only Brazil has a problem concerning encouraging African Brazilians or Afro-Brazilians or African Americans with to be bilinguals, but only the United States. How do you see this process of anti-racism in the United States, first of all? And in this mark of anti-racist scholars that many white scholars want to have in their curriculum, their life curriculum. And secondly, how do you see bilingualism? Because I know you also have problems in encouraging African Americans in international horizons. How do you see these connections between being and doing? Thank you.
And I'm so glad you said that. I almost put that in my presentation today about being and doing. So we should be more of human doings than we should be of human beings, because being means that we exist, right? So we got to take it a step further and actually do, which aligns with talking the talk. So as far as racism is concerned, racism, in my opinion, is not going to go away. It is what it is. It's been here since the beginning of time. White privilege, white supremacy, all of those very, uncomfortable terms that are there. Some people will never, ever change. We can only control what we can do. What I have talked to the younger generation, I would say like your generation and beyond, is that our future is in you all's hands. Like, my parents and grandparents, they did the marching and they did the protesting. I'm not doing that. I've seen it. It has worked. And as we saw in Tennessee, it has worked this last 2 weeks with getting those young men back into the legislature. But your voices, and that's why I was so excited about the topic of your conference. The voices of those who can make a difference need to be heard. You must step up and speak up, right? So as an educator, I'm doing a lot of writing and publishing and sharing. But the younger generation, that next generation, you must stand up and you must use your voices to talk about it. People are not sitting back and just saying, oh, we're going to accept that. It can no longer be accepted. And if you all in Brazil, and I understand that your new president is more modern and thinking and visionary and all of that, that's a good thing. There's only so much that we can do at the levels that we are, but like I said in my quote, you must do something. You must come together and do something. And oftentimes when I give presentations, like I said earlier, people want solutions. I can't give you a solution. I can give you encouragement. I can give you motivation. I can give you literature, research, and things like that. I can tell you what has worked and what has not worked on other campuses. As it relates to bilingualism, it is so important. My grandchildren are at a Spanish immersion school at ages 4, 7, 9, and 10. They are coming and talking to their father in my house, who is also bilingual, and I don't even understand what they're saying. I feel so excluded, right? It is so important, and I think that I wish that in the United States that they would require a second language for students who are graduating from high school. But I am totally in support of bilingualism and the exploration of languages, the history of languages, and how they impact our cultures. That is so important. It was a third thing that you said, and I can't remember. It was racism, language, and what was the other? I can't remember.
Anti-racism, and I think.
The what?
Anti-racism and language, and I can't remember the other one.
You can't remember either, so I don't feel bad.
So.
Yes.
So this will be the last question. I would like to ask you to make it brief, because we're running out of time. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll make it very quick. My name is Nanqi. Thank you so much, Professor Jewell. And then really, I would like to applaud every single sentence you talked. So I'm gonna make it quick. Since you mentioned about this unconscious, we all have this unconscious bias, and we'll accept it now, it's there. Do you have any ways or strategies for us to perceive this unconscious bias, come to the level of conscious bias, this perception? Yes, thank you.
Yes, so when I do diversity training, I take people through different exercises. Like I'll put pictures of things up and I ask them, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? We have to own it. I can't walk around and say, I am not biased. You have to just own whatever that is. It's a self-assessment. It's how you go from being unconsciously biased to consciously biased. And hopefully when you get to consciously biased, you're ready to do something about it, right? But it's an assessment. So there's not, I can say, well, this is how you deal with your unconscious bias and it works for everybody else because your bias is going to be different. I am personally biased against young men with their pants hanging down. I don't like it. When I see young men with their pants hanging down below their butt, I have a problem with it. And I tell them about that. That is a conscious bias, right? Because I kept wondering why I would look at guys funny when they were pants. That was an unconscious bias at that point until I realized I just don't like to see young men with their pants hanging down below their butt. That is crazy to me. So the way I dealt with it is that I had a conversation with a group of men after the Brothers United thing on campus, and I talked to them about it. I addressed my first unconscious bias that turned into conscious bias. I assessed myself, and then I dealt with it. The unfortunate part is when we don't do anything about it. When we realize what our conscious bias is, and we just say, oh, that's just who I am, and I'm not gonna change. You better change. You have to change what you believe. You can't just walk around doing, but in your heart, that is not who you are. Does that make sense? Okay, thank you. I know time is up. You all have many sessions to attend, and I don't want to keep you from your session, so I thank you from the bottom of my heart, again, for allowing me to share with you today.
Thank you so much for being here. Just some words. There will be coffee break right now to your left, and then we will return to the 11 a.m. sessions. They are all addressed in the program. At 12:30, there will be lunch, and then it will be served in the, lunch will be served. So we have to follow the student directions. And then at 2 p.m. here, we will meet again in this place for the plenary Voices from the South with Kyria Finardi. So thank you once again for your presence.